Reds Fest was this past weekend, and lots of news and rumors came out of this first event in the new Cincinnati Convention Center. Welcome in, everybody. Chatterbox Reds. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Lots of stuff coming out of that, especially about Elly De La Cruz. We'll talk about it all coming up on this edition of Chatterbox Reds. But before we do, Nick, why don't you tell everyone?
It's a new year. It's a good time to make your life a little easier. I think that's my motto for 2026, making life easier, more convenient. And there's no better way to do that with premium meats and other great food items delivered right to your door with Omaha Steaks. Everything's packaged perfectly, fits very well in a tight fridge or freezer to get you all stocked up. I know that's one of my favorite things about Omaha Steaks. Craig, you love the pre-portioned meals. I know they have a great selection called Easy Anytime Meals. I know you've talked a lot. I know we've both talked a lot about the steaks and the burgers, but we haven't talked enough about all the other things they have. I was going on their website. I didn't realize how expansive their menu and items are. They've got salmon, lobster, ribs, pot roast, ham, smash burgers, chicken tenders, pork chops, steak fries, and even wines. I didn't know there was wines on the Omaha Steaks website. Really is something for everyone. So let Omaha Steaks deliver high-quality proteins right to your door. Visit omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off on top of their already great deals with the promo code CHATTER at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code CHATTER. Terms apply. See site for details.
Welcome in, everybody. Chatterbox Reds. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got lots of great content coming up for you. This entire offseason, spring training is right around the corner. But first, we want to turn and look back to Reds Fest this past weekend. A lot of interesting tidbits coming out of the Cincinnati Convention Center. We'll start with probably the biggest news, I guess, Nick, that was discussed. And I don't know if it's necessarily a surprise to me necessarily, but still interesting that it leaked this past weekend, and we'll see what exactly it means. And that is, of course, conversation around Elly De La Cruz and a possible extension that Nick Krall extended his way that, of course, was ultimately turned down by Elly and his camp.
And Nick Krall told The Athletic that Elly De La Cruz turned down a contract extension last spring, so this would have been spring 2025, that would have made him, quote, the highest paid Reds player in franchise history. Nick Krall said, quote, that's not where he is, and you respect that. It's their career. You keep going, and you keep working on what you can do today. Of course, the most extensive contract in Reds history is Joey Votto's 10-year, $225 million deal signed in 2012. The article also noted that Krall has approached other young players on the roster about possible extension, though, of course, no deals have been reached.
All right, let's start with just the conversation around the extension, the idea of extending Elly De La Cruz. I think, myself, you, Mike, we had a little conversation about this in our little group chat. We've been talking about extending Elly De La Cruz for, I don't know, you might have been talking about it for 6 years, it feels like, at this point. So I don't think it's necessarily surprising that the Reds have offered an extension, right? But I also think it's not really that surprising that Elly De La Cruz turned it down, right?
Yeah, I guess the interesting, is the timing of this news coming out. Yeah, I mean, the Reds certainly it's pretty much a no-brainer that you should be trying to extend him, and I hope they do continue to keep trying, even if it's feels like there's no hope of that. It's hard to see, like, the longer this goes on, it happening. I mean, I was a little more optimistic in the beginning, but it just seems I don't know. It seems very difficult now at this point. For me, again, I just think if Elly ultimately ends up getting traded a couple years before he becomes a free agent at the end of the 2029 season, and the Reds have to move on, that part of it is what it is. The fact that they weren't able to extend him, like, I kind of get that aspect of it. For me, it's just going to come down to one of the biggest mistakes this franchise ever made was not trying to extend him while he was still in the minor leagues, because it felt like a no-brainer. It felt like you have an opportunity here with a player that has this ridiculous talent. You could see it coming. And if there was ever a time to really make a risk, that was it then. And maybe they would have been able to get him then. But that to me, and this isn't second guessing because like I said it then, I said before the 2023 season, I remember being asked, who would I extend on the Reds' current roster? I said Elly De La Cruz, who hadn't even debuted, was still months away from debuting. It was a no-brainer then. And I don't know, Craig, who's at fault for that. Is it, Nick Krall not having the foresight on that? Is it the fact that Nick Krall knew that ownership was never going to sign off on extending a player who hasn't debuted? Whoever it is, that to me is where the blame lies in this, is that there wasn't a real effort back then. And you would think if there would have been, they would have leaked it, or they would have been smart to leak it.
Do we know when Scott Boras started representing Elly De La Cruz?
I believe it was in the 2023 season, right before he debuted. I should have looked this up. This was actually on my thoughts.
Because to your point, right? Like, yes, of course, Cincinnati should have tried to extend him while he was still in the minor leagues. That would have been the smart thing to do. I think we all knew how electric he was and what he could bring to this Reds team. And certainly if you could have locked him up, I think it would have made a lot of sense. I think the question, of course, is what kind of advice is he getting, not only from his inner circle, but from his agent and from everybody else around him in terms of that contract extension, right? So yes, do we know if the Reds went to him and offered an extension at the minor league level? We don't know for sure. It is interesting that this came out this weekend, like you mentioned. I wonder, of course, is this C. Trent sat down with Nick Krall and as part of that conversation asked him about extending players and specifically about Elly De La Cruz. And that's when Nick kind of went off script and said, well, we offered him a contract last year. And then, of course, at that point, C. Trent's going to run with that as the big storyline. Or, was this leaked to C. Trent? And then, of course, he had to write a story about it because it got leaked. Like, where did this come from? I don't know that we know that per se. But certainly I could see, just with all due respect, I could absolutely see Nick Krall misspeaking or speaking out of turn in a way that inadvertently leaked this kind of information where, he's talking about extensions and specifically gets asked about Elly De La Cruz and he makes this comment about, well, we've tried to extend him in the past. And then all of a sudden, of course, C. Trent has to run with it. So I don't know where this came from per se, like where it started. But it is intriguing. And certainly, like you said, if they could have done this earlier, they should have done it earlier. And now they have to try and figure out with the new CBA on the horizon before the 2027 season, what does that do to Elly De La Cruz's value? We see these massive contracts getting signed left and right. But the other thing that I'm noticing, Nick, is most of them are shorter term with opt-outs. And so how does that play into Elly De La Cruz's future as well?
Yeah, I doing a little bit of research. Boras was Elly's agent on July 29th, 2023. That was about the best that I could find. Sounds like he was at some point during the 2023 season. But to be honest, I mean, it seems like I don't believe he was his agent in 2022. But I honestly think as far back as that. I think that 2022, 2023 offseason, I think that was clearly like a point that you should. For what's going forward, Craig, I mean, I think like the biggest hope is that something changes with the CBA that just makes it more feasible. Because I think something we don't talk about a lot with Elly and with free agents coming to Cincinnati and players being retained. And Elly's certainly like a totally different player in this regard. But Elly's marketability is just so much higher outside of Cincinnati, as painful as that is to say. I mean, he could just make so much more money if he was in New York, if he was in LA and endorsements. And that's just another thing that the Reds just have going for them. And maybe the whole that maybe gets lost a lot of times, in my opinion, in the, when we're talking about salary caps and salary floors and, these owners just need to spend more money. it's not even always just that. It's that they don't even have a chance with some of these guys because, like, the Reds, Elly De La Cruz could be the Reds' homegrown player, and Scott Boras is probably going to encourage him to take possibly even less money to go to a more favorable market for him. So just another unfortunate thing the Reds have going. And I hope that there's real efforts, not just for the Reds, but for players in general, that you're able to retain your homegrown talent better for all markets across baseball, like you see in other professional sports.
Yeah, I mean, look, the marketability of Elly De La Cruz, even in Cincinnati, is already off the charts. Obviously, MLB The Show cover athlete last year. You see Elly De La Cruz jerseys across the country in kids all over the country now. There's no doubt that this is a guy that fans all over Major League Baseball want to see play. The speed and the electricity that he brings on the base pass, his fun-loving energy that he brings in the dugout, it all adds up to a guy that people want to support. And so it makes a lot of sense from a marketability standpoint that he absolutely can make more money in other markets. But to your point, and this is, it's interesting. The NBA does an interesting thing with players where, NBA teams can re-sign their own players for more money and for longer terms than other teams can. They call it the bird rights, right? And so is there something that can be done at the MLB level where, hey, we drafted this kid, or we signed him out of the international pool, or whatever it may be? He's been this homegrown talent. Can we reward him more than having him go out and be somewhere else? Like, is that an option that maybe helps offset some of those things where now, yes, maybe you could make more money marketability wise in LA, but I can pay you more money. And is that enough to offset what exactly he could get in LA or somewhere else? I don't know. But there's definitely interesting rules and things around other leagues that might make sense for the MLB to explore. And I don't know if the bird rights idea is the right one to do it, but certainly there's going to be a desire to explore competitiveness within the league at this point, especially as you continue to see the Dodgers spend and spend and spend. It's just a matter of what can they agree to with the players and trying to find a common ground for something that the players are going to be willing to sign off on from a CBA perspective that allows them to still make money. And that's the biggest challenge with the salary floor or salary cap.
Yeah, I do love that contract clause or whatever it is called with the NBA. Definitely feels like something like that would make a lot of sense. And another thing that makes sense to me is just it's going to be impossible for a salary cap, or close to impossible for any sort of salary cap that actually is meaningful, because I can see them agreeing to a salary cap that still like doesn't even move the needle for small market teams. I think there just could be harsher penalties for either going over the luxury tax or whatever, and the qualifying offer could be more severe for small market teams, where basically teams like the Dodgers, like they just lose all their draft picks, and they also get less money to spend in the international pool, where it's not the international pool. Every team spends their maximum. It's not really a money thing. It's just you have this much to spend. That would be a way to kind of get these smaller markets a little bit more competitive in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. But I think we all realistically know we're probably headed for a very, very ugly next offseason that's going to go a very, very long time, if not the entire time in 2027.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And again, going back to Elly real quick before we end the conversation on the extension, we had this conversation in our group chat as well, but what's it going to take to sign Elly De La Cruz? Maybe it's just there is literally nothing that you could offer right now that Elly De La Cruz would offer, or would accept. I know Jim Bowden had a take on this earlier on in the week. On Monday, he had a comment about this, but realistically, in your eyes, where does that contract need to land to even have a shot to sign Elly De La Cruz to an extension right now?
Yeah, I think Bowden said $350 million. Kind of feels like that would be about the bare minimum, if I'm being honest. I mean, if Elly was a free agent right now, and I know that's not part of it because the Reds are assuming risk as well that he's not a free agent. I have to think he would at least get 350. I think there might be a team that would go out and pay him 400, 450. It could even get up to 500. And that might sound crazy to people just because of how young he is. I mean, this guy's only going to be 24 years old. Juan Soto got $700 million. Yes, Elly's not at Juan Soto's level, but Elly can play shortstop. Elly has base running ability. And so, yeah, I don't know. It just depends, I guess, really how much you'll listen to Scott Boras. But I don't think there's really about any number that Scott Boras is going to say, take that now. And B, I guess how risk averse he is. But he also has that whole, he signed when he was in the minor leagues. He signed some sort of agreement to where he had like an insurance policy on himself. I don't remember exactly what they called it, but he has something of that regard. And they actually get a piece of his future earnings. And there's a whole thing about, is that good for the players or not? But he has that as well. So I don't know how far that goes. But that's a whole nother layer of this.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stories about, I think it's a company called Big League Advantage that basically signs contracts with younger international players, basically gives them an upfront payment in exchange for future earnings. And in the case of Elly De La Cruz, the reports, at least that have been out there, is that he got paid $350,000 in exchange for varying rates, but somewhere between 8 and 10% of his career earnings. And so, I mean, again, we're talking about potentially a $400+ million contract. That means that Big League Advantage is going to take $40 million from Elly De La Cruz right off the bat in exchange for that $350,000 investment that they gave him early on. And that's got to play into it for sure. But, regardless of where he signs, he's going to lose out on that 10% no matter what. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. There's I think a court case ongoing with Fernando Tatis Jr. over the legality of these contracts with Big League Advantage. So not sure if that'll play in long term, but certainly, like you said, $350 million at the bare minimum seems like a starting point, I guess. But I think I told you and Mike in the group chat that I think even 10 years, $450 would be a more realistic free agent market for him right now. And even if Cincinnati offered that today, I just don't know if he would accept it or not. I don't know. It's interesting though with the upcoming CBA and what that could or could not do for his future value. It's a risk he's taking without a doubt. I mean, if the CBA goes through with some sort of limitations around salaries or salary cap or anything like that, could potentially significantly hinder his ability to earn in the future. And so definitely something that he's got to weigh as an option. But man, having Elly De La Cruz in Cincinnati for 10 plus years would certainly be something that would excite the Cincinnati fans and keep them going.
My last thought on this is just, I really think this is pretty much like a nothing burger right now. Just because, number one, we don't know how far beyond Joey Votto's contract they went. There's no clarification whatsoever. Did they offer him $300 million? I think that would change a lot of people's minds. I think people would be like, oh, wow, hey, that's actually a pretty, relative deal. What if it was like 226 or 230? I think people are like, okay, that's not really, based on inflation, that's not really that. So we don't know that. We also don't know the years. That's also a totally different thing. If you offered him $226 million, but it was only for 7 years, where you're only trying to get a couple, okay, that's a much more substantial deal than if it's $12 million for like 250 or 12 years for 250. So there's just I'm not going to get excited. Oh, hey, look, they tried. But I'm also not going to, come out with my pitchforks like, oh, they lowballed him. We have no idea. Like, it's so much speculation at this point. This really is nothing. It's like, okay, there was something there. Let's see what the next step is. And let's see, because we're going to get to an inflection point where the Reds are going to have to make like one offer, kind of like the Nationals did with Juan Soto, where they said, all right, here's our last offer, $400 million. When we get to that, I want to know, I really hope we get to find out what that was and how many years that was for. And then at that point, then we can have our judgment. But right now, there's not really any judgment to be had one way or the other than saying they should have done this when he was still in Double-A Chattanooga.
Well, I'll just say that we talked on earlier this week about the performative action of offering Kyle Schwarber a contract that may or may not have been in the realm. And here we are again with the Cincinnati Reds trying, Nick, to get a contract done with Elly De La Cruz, just like they tried to get Kyle Schwarber and try to make big-time acquisitions and try to make trades. So who knows? We will probably never know exactly what this looked like, but nonetheless, I think we can all agree that an Elly De La Cruz extension would certainly reinvigorate the fan base and be excited for the future. That wasn't the only news that came out of Reds Fest around Elly De La Cruz, though, Nick. We had talked with Gordon Whitmire a couple weeks ago on the Stone Shield show about Elly De La Cruz and the World Baseball Classic. What is the latest on Elly's status with his international team?
Well, he's not going to play. That's the status. A lot of speculation about this. You might remember the Reds and MLB, or maybe it was the Dominican Republic team, they like tweeted a picture. Elly's in. He's playing in the World Baseball Classic. And then it got deleted like an hour later. Like, oh, hey, whoa. Well, Elly's not playing. The quote is, it was from Elly De La Cruz. I was dealing with a quad injury, and they didn't want me to play. De La Cruz said it was the Reds' decision, asked if he was upset by it. I mean, I want to play. I want to represent my country, but I believe in the team being the Reds. Now, the Reds said they weren't going to stop Elly De La Cruz from playing in the World Baseball Classic. Certainly sounds like it was basically like, hey, here's a strong recommendation. We don't think you should play based on the injury. And I don't think they were going to like, if you play, we're going to bench you. Like, I don't think the Reds have that kind of leverage here. But I think they made their point known. I think Elly just said it's not worth it. I don't know. There's a lot of layers to this, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first layer that you got to peel back is the fact that Terry Francona and the Cincinnati Reds allowed Elly De La Cruz to play through that quad injury all season long in 2025. And then to turn around and act like he can't play in the World Baseball Classic because of that quad injury after he played 162 games in 2025 is a bit of a joke in my eyes. This is, he got healthier as the season went on. We know that he was injured, especially throughout the middle of the year. I just don't understand how you can sit here and look a guy in the face and say, hey, I know I forced you, or I played you 162 games, or I allowed you to play 162 games last year, even through injury. But hey, let's not play this World Baseball Classic. That just feels like such a disrespectful thing to do after a guy gave you his all and played 162 games for you last year.
Yeah, that was kind of exactly my initial takeaway is yeah, this last year, what were we doing here with not giving this guy a day off in the second half? Even if he wanted to play every day, they mismanaged Elly so bad in the second half last year. And yeah, I agree with what you said. But having said that, is it better for Elly not to play in the World Baseball Classic? I think it is. I certainly, now that we're here, now that he did play through an injury, this guy did look absolutely worn down last year. I don't really see a whole lot of benefit from just the Reds' perspective. I'm only talking about the Reds' perspective. I don't really see a whole lot of benefit in him playing in the World Baseball Classic. I think it's certainly, for the Reds alone, it's better. I don't necessarily think it's maybe right, but I don't know. If we're talking the Reds getting to the playoffs in 2026, does Elly play in the World Baseball Classic help or hurt? I think it far would lean more towards hurting than any possible advantage of it helping. Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
All right, other piece of Elly De La Cruz news, listed as the number 52 overall player in MLB Network top 100 players right now. Nick, how do you feel about Elly coming in at number 52 as the best player in 2026?
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I mean, I don't know what we're doing, especially like Pete Crow Armstrong was like 40th. Like, so we're like, it's not like this is supposed to be right now. This is supposed to be players you would take going into 2026. And there is just absolutely no way on God's green earth that there are 51 players that you would take above Elly De La Cruz, a guy that we just talked about would probably get $350, $400 million on the open market. Yeah, that's terrible. Disrespectful. I hope Elly takes it personally. I think he will. But I got a stat for you. Of course I do. Elly debuted on June 6, 2023. He ranks 20th in wins over replacement among all players. That includes pitchers. That's not just position players. There's only 3 total pitchers that are higher, and there's a lot of pitchers that are ahead of him on that list. He's ahead of Kyle Tucker. I think he just signed for a pretty decent deal. Rafael Devers, Fernando Tatis, Alex Bregman, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, and Kyle Schwarber. So, yeah, I think that's a joke.
Yeah. He's joined on the list by Reds teammates Hunter Green, who came in at number 45, and Andrew Abbott, who came in at number 90 on the list. Any final thoughts on Elly De La Cruz and his 2026, Nick?
No, there's a lot of news about Elly De La Cruz, but obviously I can't wait to watch Elly play again for the Cincinnati Reds. And, you know, we're just going to cherish every game that he has because, you know, this is obviously going to be one of, I think, the most talented players ever to wear a Cincinnati Reds uniform, no matter how long it lasts. And I'm excited. He was so good. I think because of how bad he was the last 2 months of the season, and we hope it's all quad related. I don't think you can bank on it all being quad related, but we hope it was. I think people forget how good he was the first, you know, really through June. I mean, this was a player that was like, oh, wow, he's like cut down on his strikeout rates. He's like done everything you want. He's still hitting home runs. The only thing he wasn't doing is stealing base, which is a whole other show for another day. But, man, he was the best version of himself outside of the base running and maybe the defense. But offensively, he was the best version of himself for those few months. And if he can, he doesn't even have to do that for a full year altogether. But if he can do that for the majority of the year, I mean, you're legitimately looking at a player that completely changes the outlook of the team.
Absolutely. We'll have all the Elly De La Cruz coverage throughout all of 2026, of course, right here on Chatterbox Sports, along with a bunch of other great content, including Off the Bench and the Stone Shields Show, which airs Monday through Friday from 10 a to 12 p. Chatterbox Bearcats, Chatterbox Bengals, and the Flying Lion. Got you covered on Shorts wherever you get your social media, whether it be X, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. We've got full episodes in video right here on YouTube and in podcast form wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you drop us a like, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast, drop us a 5-star review. We sincerely appreciate it, and it helps us reach even more Reds fans. So until next time, for Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds. We'll see you next time.